I used to live in the city. The urban lifestyle was honestly what I had always envisioned for myself. I won't get into too much detail, but after an extremely traumatic experience, I couldn't bear even the smallest noises. I began to hate sound in general. My psychiatrist told me I had developed a rare case of phonophobia, that pins and needles feeling you get when your foot falls asleep. It was like that, but in my chest. Constant. Always there. It felt like my body was bracing for something that never came. Every car horn, every slamming door felt like a jolt straight to my nerves. I couldn't keep living like that. About 3 years ago, I found a cabin buried deep in the Pacific Northwest. I don't want to say exactly where it was for reasons you'll soon understand, but all I'll say is that it was somewhere in Oregon. It seemed perfect. Very few neighbors, no traffic, barely any cell service. What really sold me on it, though, was the lack of noise. It was just me, and the silence. For the first time in months, I thought I might actually feel safe. The cabin itself was small, but cozy. To be fair, it was exactly what the listing had promised. You could tell it had been built to last, with thick wooden beams and a sturdy stone fireplace. When I first walked in, it smelled like pine and old books, that earthy scent that's almost comforting. Think of one of those old cabin-style bed and breakfasts, like the kind you stay at when you go skiing. The nearest neighbor lived about a 10-minute walk away, down a narrow dirt path. I didn't meet her right away, though. For the first few days, I just soaked in the silence. I woke up to the sound of birds instead of sirens. At night, the only thing I heard was the wind brushing through the trees. It felt like the whole world had pressed pause, and I could finally breathe again. I worked entirely from my laptop, so there was no real need to connect with the outside world beyond that. About a week after I moved in, there was a knock at the door. The cabin didn't have a doorbell, obviously, so I knew knocks were something I'd have to get used to. I opened the door expecting it to be my neighbor, and it was. She was a moderately old woman, carrying a basket of preserves, like she had just stepped out of a Hallmark movie. She introduced herself as Evelyn and told me she lived about 10 minutes down the trail, which didn't sound far at all until you factored in how dense the woods were. You could get turned around out there just looking for firewood. She was in her late 60s, with oddly long gray hair and piercing blue eyes that made you feel like she could see straight through you. She wasn't rude, just blunt. She welcomed me to the woods and extended the basket toward me, clearly expecting me to take it. I didn't really have much of a choice. She was practically shoving it into my hands. It sounds hospitable, but her vibe seemed off. I can't really explain it any better than that. I took the basket impulsively, though I'll admit I had never been treated that way by a neighbor before. It wasn't anything extreme, just unfamiliar. I thanked her as I accepted it, but she looked at me like she was expecting me to say something else. I didn't know what, so I just smiled. She continued staring at me in silence, which only confirmed my suspicion that she didn't interact with many people. Eventually she spoke. These were her exact words I'll never forget. Always keep your lanterns full, your windows shut tight, and your wits sharper than your axe. It wasn't something a normal person would say. It sounded less like advice and more like a warning. I nodded, smiled again, and turned to go back inside. After I shut the door, I stood there in silence, listening for her footsteps to fade away. They didn't. She stayed there for a good 45 seconds. That was probably the strangest part of the entire interaction. Despite the unsettling vibe, I told myself I appreciated her kindness. She seemed reclusive, but not unfriendly. The kind of person who would help if you asked, but wouldn't go out of her way to pry. It was comforting, in a way, knowing someone lived nearby, even if I didn't plan on ever needing her. I didn't even bother looking inside the basket. I set it down in the living room and forgot about it. That night, a thunderstorm rolled in. Thunderstorms are rare in Oregon, but they do happen. I lit a few candles and curled up on the couch with a book, trying to ignore the fact that the power flickered every few minutes. Some people might find that level of isolation terrifying. For some reason, I loved it. The natural sounds of the storm didn't bother me. In fact, it was that specific storm that made me realize something. Listening to the rain and thunder felt almost soothing. But that feeling didn't last. A few hours after the storm began, there was a knock at the door that nearly made me jump out of my skin. Calling it a knock isn't quite right. It was more like banging, loud, urgent. Whoever it was clearly didn't care that it was pouring rain outside. My heart started racing, and that awful pins and needles sensation crept back into my chest. After hesitating for a few seconds, I grabbed my flashlight and checked the small glass pane beside the door. It was Evelyn, soaked to the bone, clutching a flashlight of her own. I opened the door, and she spoke before I even had a chance to greet her. She blurted out that she had seen someone near my woodpile, and that I needed to know. Confused but alarmed, I stepped onto the porch and scanned the rain-soaked trees with my flashlight. I didn't see anything, just darkness. I asked her if she was sure. She nodded. Her eyes kept darting toward the woods, like she was expecting someone to step out at any second. Before I could say anything else, she told me to be careful, then turned and walked away. She didn't wait for a response. I watched her disappear down the narrow path, completely unfazed by the storm. The moment I shut the door, something didn't sit right. How could she have seen someone near my woodpile if her cabin was 10 minutes away? That meant she must have already been on my property. Why would she be snooping around my cabin during a thunderstorm? Was she lying? I didn't like the thought, but marching to her place in the middle of a storm wasn't an option. I locked the cabin as securely as I could and sat in my bedroom listening. The storm eventually died down, but my unease didn't. Hours passed without incident, and I finally decided it was safe to sleep. Sometime after midnight, I woke up to the sound of a branch snapping just outside my bedroom window. I'm a very light sleeper. I knew exactly what I heard. I froze, listening. After a few tense seconds, I crept toward the window. At first, I saw nothing. Then I saw her, Evelyn, standing at the edge of the woods, her body angled away from my cabin. I recognized her by her long, disheveled hair. There was only moonlight to see by, so details were impossible to make out. When she began to turn toward the house, I ducked below the window. I stayed crouched there for what felt like forever. When I finally looked again, she was gone. I didn't know what to think. I hadn't considered her dangerous before, just strange. But now I wasn't so sure. Why warn me? If she was the one lurking around, I didn't sleep for the rest of the night. I planned on staying awake until sunrise. A few hours passed. Just as I started to let my guard down, there was another knock at the door. This one was quieter, deliberate. I approached the door slowly and peeked through the glass. I froze. It wasn't Evelyn. It was a burly, bald man with a thick beard. I had to fight every instinct not to scream. The situation instantly went from bad to terrifying. I retreated to the bathroom, locked the door, and called the police. While I was on the phone, the banging started again. This time it sounded like someone was smashing the door with something heavy. The operator told me help was on the way and instructed me not to hang up. Then the front door gave way. I heard it crash open. I was certain I was going to die. The man began destroying everything in the cabin. Glass shattering, wood splintering, furniture breaking. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. Somehow, he never came looking for me. Eventually, the noise stopped. The police arrived shortly after. The man was gone. They did a brief search, but refused to check the woods, saying it was too dense. I begged them to come with me to Evelyn's cabin. They agreed. When we got there, my jaw dropped. The cabin was abandoned. The police confirmed that no one had lived there in decades. I told them to search it for squatters. They refused. They told me living in the woods was a risk I had chosen. Then they left. I moved out shortly after, but not before spending one final night in that cabin. Nothing happened. Still, I think about it all the time. Some of my friends believe Evelyn was a spirit trying to protect me. I don't believe in the paranormal. I think it's far more likely that two people had been squatting in that abandoned cabin. I just don't understand why they targeted me, or why she warned me at all. I don't think I'll ever know. My name is Ethan, my girlfriend Laura, and I met 3 years ago during our freshman year of college. We both attend Stanford. It had been my dream school since I was 8 years old. Neither of us are from California. Not even close. We're both from Ohio. She's from Cincinnati. I'm from just outside Columbus. I think that's part of why we connected so quickly. People from similar places always seem to find each other. Stanford isn't a huge school, but most students are originally from California. Being from the Midwest definitely set us apart. One tradition we created early on was how we split Christmas between our families. Laura is loved by my relatives. At this point, her presence is expected. Her house is only a 2-hour drive from mine, so we decided on a routine. Christmas Eve with my family, then drive through the night to her parents' house for Christmas Day. Before I met her, I didn't even realize most families celebrate Christmas during the day, not the night before. But honestly, my favorite part of the holiday isn't Christmas Eve or Christmas Day, it's the drive. That late night drive became its own tradition. Quiet roads, no traffic, just the two of us. Because of where I live, the fastest route doesn't use a highway. It's all back roads, fields, trees, the occasional distant farmhouse. At that hour, it feels like the world is asleep, like we're the only ones awake. Don't laugh. But we always blast Juice WRLD on those drives. His music has been our thing since the day we met. Singing the lyrics together felt weirdly intimate, like we were perfectly in sync. This past Christmas Eve started like any other. After a warm night with my entire extended family, we packed the car around midnight and hit the road. Snow fell lightly. The roads were empty. With the heat on high and the music loud, everything felt perfect. Then my phone rang, an unknown number. I glanced down, annoyed. Who calls this late on Christmas Eve? I ignored it. Probably a scam call. Laura joked about how dedicated call center workers must be to make calls on Christmas. We laughed. A few minutes later, my phone rang again. Another unknown number. I sighed and let it go to voicemail. Laura raised an eyebrow. "That's weird," she said. I shrugged it off. The music resumed. 2 minutes later, my phone rang again. This time I snapped. I grabbed the phone, swiped aggressively, and barked. "Hello?" I startled Laura. I expected a script, a robot voice. Instead, silence. Then I heard faint static. I was about to hang up when a man spoke. "Hello, Ethan." I nearly swerved off the road. My entire body began to itch, the way it always does when I'm terrified. Before I could respond, the man continued. He started listing things. My full name, my address, details about my life, things no stranger should know, things no stranger could know. My mind raced. I wanted to pull over, but my hands kept the wheel steady like I was in a trance. Finally, I asked him what he wanted. There was a pause. Then he said the words that froze my blood. "I'm not calling for you. I'm calling for Laura." Hearing her name was far worse than hearing my own. The look on her face told me everything. I lied. I said I didn't know anyone by that name, that he had the wrong number. The man chuckled. "She's sitting right next to you." I pulled over immediately. My hands were shaking uncontrollably. Before I could say another word, Laura leaned across me and ended the call. I screamed at her, demanded to know why she hung up on someone who clearly knew too much. She didn't answer, just stared at me, eyes wide with fear. I tried calling the number back. Once, twice, 3 times. It never went through. Laura told me to keep driving. I did. In silence. Part of me was furious. Part of me was terrified. I kept expecting the phone to ring again. It never did. At one point, I looked over at her. She was crying. She said she didn't feel safe. I understood that, but something in my gut wouldn't let go. We'd had issues before, white lies, half-truths, nothing major, but enough to plant doubt. I hated myself for thinking it, but I couldn't ignore it. The rest of the drive was silent. No music, no talking, Just questions. Who was that man? How did he know so much? Only our families knew we'd be driving that night, and none of them would do this. Even when we arrived, I didn't feel safe. It's been almost a month. No answers, no explanations. Laura swears she knows nothing, which leaves only one possibility. Whoever called us had sinister intentions. Every time my phone rings now, my body tenses, because I know he's going to call again. It's only a matter of time. This happened a few months ago. I've been driving for Lyft for several years now, and I usually stick to late-night shifts. The roads are quieter, and the tips are better, but there's always a trade-off. Every once in a while you experience something that stays with you, and not in a good way. I always thought of myself as careful. I've dealt with my fair share of strange passengers, but nothing, and I mean nothing, came even close to what I'm about to tell you. I didn't have a dash cam back then. That night is the exact reason I installed one. It started out normal enough, just me, and the familiar creaks and rattles of my car. I drive a beat-up 2005 Volvo. Not pretty, but reliable as hell. The streets were completely deserted, which, honestly, I preferred. Sometime after 2 a.m., I got a ride request near a convenience store. It looked harmless at first, but for some reason, I felt this tight knot in my stomach. You know that feeling, when something feels wrong, but you can't explain why. That's exactly what I felt. Before I even saw him, I understood why. The convenience store was closed. All the lights were off. Not a single car in the parking lot. That should have been my sign to leave, but I didn't. As I pulled closer, I saw him. I slowed down, wanting a better look. He was pacing outside the store, wearing a filthy, torn hoodie. There was a hole in the sleeve, like it hadn't been washed in years. His movements were jerky, unstable. He kept glancing over his shoulder like someone was hunting him. If I had to guess, he was on something. I should have canceled the ride. My finger hovered over the cancel button, but instead, I unlocked the doors. He slid into the back seat without saying a word. I regretted it the moment I took my foot off the brake. Most passengers scroll on their phones or stare out the window. Not him. He stared at me through the rearview mirror, not blinking, not looking away, just staring. When our eyes met, I noticed something else. He looked angry. That made my skin crawl. I turned on the radio, trying to break the silence. The moment music started playing, he snapped. "Turn it off." His voice was deep, raspy, a smoker's voice. I did exactly as he said, both hands gripping the steering wheel tighter. We drove in silence for a while. I hoped that was it, that he'd stay quiet until we reached his stop. But then, he spoke again. "Have you ever picked up someone you shouldn't have?" The question hit me like a punch to the chest. I let out an awkward laugh. "I hope not," I said. He didn't laugh back. He leaned into the seat, muttering something under his breath. Then he told me he used to drive for Uber, said he quit after some guys broke into his car. His words were slurred, hard to follow, but then I noticed something. He was smiling the entire time. No normal person smiles while telling a story like that. He finished by saying, "It's funny how much trust you put in someone sitting right behind you." That's when fear really set in. My heart started racing. I stared at the road, but my mind was spiraling. I focused on the GPS like it was a lifeline, but he wouldn't stop talking, rambling, apologizing to someone who wasn't there. I didn't mean it. I didn't mean it. Over and over again. We were only minutes from his destination when he suddenly screamed that I missed the turn. I didn't. The GPS was clear, but I slammed on the brakes anyway, out of pure fear. He ordered me to pull over, so I did. My hands were shaking. Then headlights appeared behind us. A police car. I silently prayed. The spotlight swept over my car. The man in the back seat slid down, flattening himself against the seat, eyes shut tight, pretending not to exist. After a long, terrifying silence, he sat up, looked at me, and said, "You got lucky." Then he opened the door and vanished into the darkness. Weeks later, I read a news article on my phone. A convenience store had been robbed that same night, 2 blocks away from where I picked him up. It still makes me sick, knowing I was inches away from someone who could have killed me, and chose not to. Since that night, I'm much more careful about who I let into my car